Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Burn It Down with Kim Brown, the show where we set oppression ablaze and believe that a better world and better future is absolutely possible. I'd like to thank everybody. Welcome to the program today. Appreciate you stopping by. Thanks for stopping by. Let me give y'all my best Veronica Corningstone real quick. Listen, first and foremostly, do me a favor. Go over to the Burn It Down with Kim Brown YouTube channel. Click subscribe there. We are only going to be on the real news until December 22nd. So if you still want to continue to get Burn It Down with Kim Brown, I need you to go over to the designated channel and subscribe if you could, please. I certainly appreciate it. Hey, what's up to everybody that's been standing by and waiting in the chat and in the comments, all of our good family that has been rolling with us really this entire insane year of 2020. So hello, everybody. Love to see y'all smiling faces up in the place. Listen, today's program, y'all, Proud Boys Run Wild, while police stand by again. I hope you got a chance to check out the events that not only happened in the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., but cities really across the country, specifically Olympia, Washington. We're going to get there in just a moment. But to protest the results of the national election. This was the weekend that the Electoral College gathered in state capitals nationwide to cast their electoral votes for President-elect Joe Biden. Well, Trump supporters decided to show up, and quote unquote, stop the steal. But when they came to Washington, D.C., they committed acts of violence. They committed assault on protesters, on DC residents, on people who showed up to defend the streets of Washington, DC. As we saw, they may even committed some hate crimes, stealing signs off of historically Black churches, defacing the churches, destroying property, while police, Metropolitan Police, under the leadership of a Democratic mayor, of a Black woman, no less. Somehow police were unable to keep track of all of these marauding white supremacists, but they were able to find and abuse and pepper spray activists who are in the streets defending DC and out there on behalf of the movement for Black lives. So we have a big conversation ready for you. Like I mentioned, Olympia, Washington, where similar demonstrations were taking place. An anti-fascist protester was actually shot in the chest. We have some journalists that are out there on the ground who are going to join us and give us some details about that. Shauna Sowersby will be joining us, also a representative from Independent Media PDX. But first, we're going to start in Washington, D.C., and I'd like to bring in our guests for this talking point right here, because it was literally insane in the nation's capital. We've had him on the show before. Of course, you probably know him if you're on Twitter. Journalist and photojournalist Chuck Modiano is on the scene, joining us today. Welcome back, Chuck. Nice to see you again.
Great to see you. Great to be here. Thank you.
And we're also joined with photojournalist, artist, and activist Sean Michael Love from Black House News. Both Sean and Chuck have been out there all weekend and even beforehand. So I know this has been a very trying several days for the both of you. So I appreciate you both making some time to join us. Sean, thank you and welcome. We appreciate you making some time for us, because you guys are literally coming from a jail support action. So I know things have been kind of hectic. So I appreciate y'all being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So listen, I was going through both y'all's timelines and I'm like, yo, if we played all the videos that you guys shot, we would easily be here for like an hour and a half. So I wanted to run a quick compilation of not only videos shot by Black House News and Chuck Modiano, but other journalists who were on the scene and witnessing and bearing witness to the violence that the Proud Boys and Trump supporters brought to Washington, D.C. over the weekend. So let me give y'all a little preface of what we're about to see. Like I said, we're about to see a compilation. We're going to open, Sean, with one of your videos when you were accosted by roughly a dozen or so Proud Boys at the onset of the weekend, just coming up to you talking shit, you know, because I guess you was just out there, not just out there, but you're out there doing your job. But because of your presence as a Black person, they felt as if they could confront you with some nonsense. And then this is a trigger warning for everybody else. What you're going to see in subsequent videos, you're going to see a non-confrontational couple being attacked by alleged Proud Boys. You're going to see other acts of violence being committed. So let me just give y'all a heads up of what we're about to witness. Dwayne, can we check that out, please?
All right. Okay. Come on, let's go down the road, bro. You want to go down the road and talk about it?
Think twice, motherfucker. You're standing for the wrong fucking reason.
I'm standing for the wrong reason. Son. Our streets. Remember that.
I'm standing for the wrong reason.
Right
I'm standing for the wrong reason.
So think about that.
We're a
fucking
force
ice
of
cream
love.
sandwich
You're all evil.
Think about that ice cream sandwich you're in right now. The middle usually gets ate first, don't it? Yeah.
What the hell sense does that make?
The middle usually gets ate first out of the ice cream sandwich, Dave.
Yeah, all you're fucking antis stand for nothing but bullshit. And fuck you.
Knock me down, bro.
You know these people.
Yeah, the middle, the center of the ice cream sandwich gets ate first. Remember that.
No, they can stand up for free speech.
Everybody
Just like
loves
we
the
can.
clean filling. Fucking scumbag, fucking communist scumbags. Come on, I'm going to have a meeting over here.
When you have free money and shit, bro, you supposed to get hand and shit. It's called capitalism. Motherfucker, make something. So, stop asking for free shit, pussy.
Get back.
Lock it in. Oh, so he doesn't want to be funny. He doesn't support you guys. You just heard him. Hey, you know what I just said. You understand. I know you're right.
Last time.
I'm talking about
Yeah, he's up there doing ass fighting.
I had to change my sense.
Do it now.
You guys communists?
Right.
I know you're not going to fight for this country. You're going to do whatever they tell you to do.
Don't agitate. That's all
I'm agitating you right now. That's what I'm doing.
That's the end of the conversation.
That's why you walked away.
100% right here.
You walked away. Yeah, you walked away.
Motion.
You don't want to get. You want to get defunded? You like your job?
Don't be a puppet.
Yeah, that's right.
Enjoy your day.
Yeah. I mean, you can't argue that, can you? They want you out of here. I know you're logical, but understand that's not smart. You like your job? You like your pension? You got family?
And then there's people getting fed up of people. Oh man, they're getting beat up. They're getting beat up.
Hold up! Where's your scooter at, motherfucker? Where's your scooter? Not off this! Not off this! You made your point. Yeah!
National molecule of America, and people make the shit for hell.
Don't come back!
Get the fuck out of here! Get out of here, bitch! Get out of here!
Don't fucking come back! Come back! Don't you ever come back! Don't you come back!
Right! We're trying. I need my
Go, you need to fucking stop.
Don't come back! No, that's don't ever! Pussy ass fucking bitches! Don't come back here!
Yeah, stay with me. Stay with me. Stay with me.
Fuck Antifa! Fuck Antifa!
All right, back up.
So in addition to Sean's videos there, those videos were also taken from Twitter users Chris Stock, BG on the scene, and Just Eric Thomas. Where do we begin? Sean, since you haven't been here before, let me start with you. Talk to me about what you witnessed and what you experienced, even beyond these videos that we saw. And what was the tone, the sentiment on the streets of DC this weekend?
Ran through DC this weekend. I never had a face-to-face experience with the Ku Klux Klan, but this was that experience. They were using every racial slur in the dictionary towards every Black and brown person. They were unafraid to do so, and they felt empowered to do so. Every Black and brown person on the street was always outnumbered. So anytime you were in a small group, even if it's 2 or 5, there was always either 20 or 30 or more of them. And they always came aggressively, ready to do harm. And every chance they got, they exercised that will. And the police, the worst part about it, every situation, every encounter with the police, when the police were around, they would let the Proud Boys go ahead and engage and attack these smaller group of Black and brown people or LGBTQ community or allies. They would sit back and then they would just maybe wait until that fighting was over. Then they push them off. No arrests were made afterwards. That's the part that just really, really, really pisses me off, is that as much violence as the police were seeing, they weren't intervening to make arrest of this hate group, of these domestic terrorists, these white nationalists that were coming in to do this harm. They let them keep going and go attack another group. And that's what they did. They went in groups, moving around the city, looking for Black and brown people, specifically one. And then they even attacked people who they would say, if you weren't wearing a mask. I spoke to a woman who got abused as well. Like, oh, you're wearing a mask, you must be Antifa. And she was being harassed all the way down to the plaza. But she was just coming in to support. White woman. And that was maybe the best case scenario. Every other case scenario was violence. We still have people in the hospital right now that may not be out of the hospital for a while from some of the injuries they suffered. And like I said, on personal things that I've witnessed, some of the brutality against Black women specifically, that touches me just in a different, of course, in a real personal space. Seeing a Black woman get brutalized by white men, seeing Black men trying to fight and defend them, and still being outnumbered and trying to do the best they can. But hate ran through DC this weekend.
Incredible. And I appreciate you mentioning the numbers and how the people who were there defending the streets from the white supremacists were outnumbered. And I'm telling you, as a DMV native, if it wasn't for this pandemic, it would be a different scenario out there. I know a lot of people who were like, man, if it wasn't for the Rona, I would be down there. But a lot of people are fearful of the pandemic, and justifiably so. Chuck Modiano, you were here just about 3 weeks ago in November when the first Million MAGA March happened in support of Donald Trump immediately in the days and weeks following the election. Was there any difference between what you saw in November and what you saw this weekend, both from who showed up, the white supremacists, and from Metropolitan Police Department?
I mean, not really. First, I want to say it's great to be on your show with Sean, because Sean and I are in the streets together all the time, including an hour ago. So to be here, I really appreciate that. And to your point, I mean, everything was entirely predictable that happened this weekend. Entirely predictable. And I think that's the most frustrating part. When we talked 3 weeks ago and we saw the Trumpers rioting on Black Lives Matter Plaza, tearing down private property signs off the Lewina building at night, as MPD watched, stood and watched, as MPD made no arrest, which was unheard of to regular DC protesters, as MPD tear gas nobody. That already happened, and that was a precursor to the same thing happening, except this time it happened on a black church. Well, tell me what wasn't predictable about what happened. We saw violence 3 weeks ago. There were 3 stabbings. I had an opportunity to interview a couple of people who were stabbed. Well, there were stabbings again. And we also know when there were assaults, and I was able to film a couple of assaults, and Sean spoke to a black woman being assaulted, what we found out about who was arrested, it wasn't the white Proud Boy in the blue jacket who threw a punch and assaulted a black woman. It was a black woman who got arrested. It was the black man who intervened got arrested, not the Proud Boys. So what's so disturbing is what Sean said about this preferential treatment that favored white supremacists in this city, but also that it was entirely predictable. So for anyone in DC leadership to talk like this is unexpected or new or not 100% preventable is very problematic, and it is simply a lie.
Well, let's go right there, shall we, gentlemen? Mayor Muriel Bowser held a press conference yesterday, as she does daily, to update district residents on the status of the coronavirus pandemic. But of course, she had to take questions about what took place in her city. And we also have clips from DC Police Chief, soon to be outgoing DC Police Chief, Peter Newsham. Dwayne, can we run that Mayor Chief Newsham clip, please?
We know, too, that 3 of our churches had their Black Lives Matter signs destroyed. And to see the video of that footage on social media is shocking and disturbing and certainly maddening. And certainly a violation of our values as DC residents. And as it has been pointed out, to see those men burning a Black Lives Matter sign in the middle of the street that was taken from a black church is reminiscent of violent acts of racism our country has seen before, and it is disgusting and vile and should be condemned by all Americans. We have reached out to the churches yesterday, and MPD will continue to investigate these hate crimes.
And as the mayor mentioned, we had a very disturbing situation where at least 4 churches in the city had destruction of property at their churches. One was the Mount Vernon. These are the ones that we know of: Mount Vernon Place United Methodist, Metropolitan AME, Asbury United Methodist, and Luther Place Memorial Church. What I would say with regards to the destruction of property that we saw at the churches, that type of thing will not be tolerated here in the District of Columbia. We will be releasing some very good images of the suspects in a couple of those cases. We would ask the public, if you have any information as to who those suspects are, please call us on 202-727-9099, or you can text us at 50411. Again, that type of behavior will not be tolerated in the District of Columbia.
Sean, let me go to you first. When you hear DC Police Chief Peter Newsham say that type of behavior won't be tolerated when it was quite clearly tolerated the entire fucking weekend from Metropolitan Police Department, I mean, I was horrified and aghast seeing these white supremacists go through residential neighborhoods, no less. It's it's not cool to fuck with people on Black Lives Matter Plaza, but when you're fucking with people who are not even there for the fight, and DC police allowing their residents and citizens to be abused, to be attacked by these virulent white supremacists, what is your reaction to what Muriel Bowser and Peter Newsham had to say to the city right there?
Well, it was a half-hearted apology. They allowed it to happen by giving them the permit to march in the first place. And these groups announced what they were going to do beforehand. Every photojournalist in DC, every media person in DC knew they were announcing what they were going to do on Parler and on Twitter. They were making their threats known. Those 4 churches specifically are big in the community, for the activist community, for giving out food, giving out mutual aid, and providing shelter to the community. So they already had intentions and plans to go after those churches, Black churches, churches that stood up for freedom and justice and welcomed people that were fighting for freedom and justice. So they should have already had protection around those places, and they chose not to do so. And when they started to commit those acts of violence, they didn't immediately swoop in. They sat back and let it happen. They should have went after those folks immediately as soon as they took to the streets, but they didn't. They let it go. So it's a half-hearted apology. It's weak. And the fact that there's independent journalists that have already ID'd the folks that did some of those hate crimes, and they still haven't been arrested. They arrest protesters quicker on the streets of DC for spray painting a wall. But you have people defacing Black churches and they're still roaming around free. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable.
And, you know, Chuck, I want you to speak to the very chummy nature that DC police seem to have with some members of either the Proud Boys or Trump supporters or, you know, white supremacists in general, flat out fucking Nazis in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
So wait, no, go ahead, Chuck. Go ahead, say something.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. Any independent journalist could snatch a photo of pictures of Trumpers or Proud Boys with the police. You can see them smiling. You could see them talking with each other. When you look at the police line that happened on Saturday, notice that I walked in freely in Freedom Plaza where the Trumpers and Proud Boys were, a privilege that I have, that I may not get harassed the same way Sean might be harassed. But there was no line. I was free to come in and out. And we have to look at who was circled by police. It was Black Lives Matter. The entire section was cut off. So it took me 3 hours to get in to Black Lives Matter Plaza because police cut it off, that you could not go in. And if they let you in later, you could not go out. And the effect and impact of that is that protesters who were in opposition to the Proud Boys couldn't go protect each other. Journalists couldn't go film each other. And some of the brutality that you saw, the MPD stopped us from documenting that brutality because we may see a tape, but tell me about the tapes we haven't seen. And that is really troubling, the connection between MPD and the Proud Boys, and we cannot stress that enough.
And gentlemen, you know, you both have been documenting and covering these demonstrations, not just when the Proud Boys come to town, but when there are other actions in the city. I'm thinking about how, you know, the young man who lost his life because he was being trailed by DC police on an e-scooter, Karan Brown, and how violent MPD became with his family and people that were supporting them. You all were out at a jail support yesterday for members who had been arrested. And it was interesting in that press conference, Peter Newsham sort of detailed some of the arrests. And there was a good number of people who were from out of state, from way across the country, Texas, California, Florida, Georgia. I mean, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure I know who those folks are. But I want us to look at how DC organizers and activists were treated as they were awaiting their comrades' release from jail. And this just happened yesterday. So again, this is a montage of both Black House news clips and Chuck Modiano clips. So Dwayne, can we take a look at that?
Hey, he got the canister. Hey, yo! So it's not even on the fucking post, you fucking audience. Y'all are fucking bullshit. You say shit and say it's wrong. And you don't say it's like that. You don't say it's fucking like that. Y'all all pieces of fucking shit. All fucking pieces of shit. Yo, you fucking
I need you to back up.
Why?
You're too close.
Why?
Back up.
You're the one who's too close to me. Don't fucking touch me. Don't fucking touch me. Don't fucking touch me. Stop fucking touching me. Stop fucking touching me. Stop fucking touching me. You fucking stop that. I'm not doing shit.
Was that you, Star? Oh, shit. You got all that, too?
I mean, that it was just seemingly a lot of unnecessary provocation from the police towards these supporters waiting for, you know, their friends to come out of jail. Sean, was this unusual for MPD to show up at a jail support action like this and behave specifically in this way?
Yes, I can tell you that nobody was prepared to wear their goggles or respirator. That's not what we were planning on doing. There was no reason for anybody to come out there expecting violence. They show up and maybe say, hey, don't put your table here, or hey, can you not go over there, which is normal, you know, normal police bullshit. But that kind of violence using chemical weapons, no, nobody was expecting that.
Chuck, what did you think when you saw Metropolitan Police show up at what is usually not a confrontational event and blatantly start fucking with people, and then beyond fucking with people, start pepper spraying people, as Sean mentioned, people who were not prepared for that kind of action? What did you think upon witnessing all that?
Absolutely. I didn't bring my goggles either, and I bring my goggles to every protest. And the reason I didn't bring my goggles is that jail support is not a protest. It's food, it's love. I'm so happy you showed the initial videos, but to see the love of people coming out, being greeted. Many protesters know what it's like to be locked up for a couple days over the last 6 months. It's not fun. It's not a pleasant experience. And protesters want others to feel that warmth. So there were 4 new problems that happened here. The first one is, why is there a police line? Why was a police line put up when people are just warmly greeting people coming out of jail? That's problem number 1. Problem number 2, why were police pushing protesters? Why? After the police line was set up, they were pushing and they were shoving and they were aggressive. Why were they doing that? And then number 3, where's this pepper spray coming from? What's the reason that they're doing this pepper spray like it's a protest, even when they shouldn't be assaulting protesters at protests? This is jail support. And then this is number 4 is this comes a day after the mayor's statements about how they're going to be hard on the Proud Boys. And a day later, the only people who have had repercussions were people at jail support trying to warmly greet their friends who have been wrongly and falsely arrested. And I could back that statement up from in other places.
Gentlemen, we're running a little low on time because, again, similar shit happened out in Olympia, Washington, except anti-fascist protester was actually shot. Thankfully, the young man survived the attack, but it's not a stretch, given that what we saw in Kenosha, given that what we seen in cities and in towns across this country this entire year, and of course even beforehand. But I'm fearful for the both of you and for people who have been willingly putting their bodies out on the line in defense of Black lives, in defense of Chocolate City. They're coming back. These Proud Boys, these white supremacists intend to return to the city on inauguration. I want to hear from the both of you. I mean, tell me, what does Muriel Bowser need to see from these Proud Boys to direct her police department? Like, no, you have to collect these sons of bitches. Like, you have to collect the fuck out of them. Like, because they are terrorizing residents of this city. And in addition to that, like, she got to collect her police department in terms of being chummy and fraternizing openly with these white supremacists who are invoking terror in this city. Sean, let me start with you, man. I mean, what are we to expect January 20th, and why is it going to suck in many ways?
Well, one, they shouldn't have a permit to protest in the first place. They shouldn't be able to obtain the permit to gather to be here in the first place. That's step 1. And the difference between the Proud Boys and the Klan is they don't wear a hood. They're openly unmasked and proud and have their colors out and boldly show who they are. Those are the people you need to watch. And as soon as they engage you, you need to go and arrest them. A lot of them were armed and they were just allowed to walk around. The police need to be able to step in just as soon as they step into the Black community. If you're not going to approach domestic terrorists with that same kind of force and vigor as you approach Black and brown people every day, then we're going to continue to have problems. So I don't have any faith in the mayor that she will actually do something concrete to keep Black and brown people safe in the city anymore.
Chuck Modiano, I mean, Democratic leadership on the local level, at least in the nation's capital, is seemingly a joke, and not interested in protecting citizens, not interested in protecting historic Black churches from being vandalized and destroyed by white supremacists who apparently have carte blanche to come to the nation's capital and tear shit up. What are your thoughts about looking forward to inauguration and what the response is going to be, not only from the city, the police, but from people who have been gathering in the streets all year long?
Well, it's hard to say exactly, but I know what we have to do. We have to make white supremacists afraid again, okay? So we saw with Trump's election, white supremacists were emboldened that hundreds would come to Charlottesville. And let's not forget that a few thousand met them in response and came from DC to shut them down. And prior to Heather Heyer dying by the man who killed him with the car, that was actually the storyline. And what we have to also remember is 1 year later, they had a Unite the Right rally in DC in 2018. And thousands of protesters showed up, but only 50 white supremacists showed up. And what happened in between is people were sent to jail, people were doxxed, people lost their jobs. We found out white supremacists were teachers and doctors. We exposed them, and a campaign went on to make white supremacists afraid again. And we have to do the same thing because no, they're no longer afraid. Now they could walk around DC with MPD's permission. So I don't wait for MPD or the mayor to do their job, but I know we have it in the city to get thousands out in response to shut them down. What I don't know is if we have that response in a Biden administration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're going to have to leave it there. Let me just say that I'm telling y'all, I know this for a fact. It's the pandemic. The pandemic is keeping people home. And the fact that these people, these white supremacists are marauding around the city unmasked, right? Just looking like a whole super spreader occasion. That is the reason I think that we're not seeing the numbers from the left side meet them in the streets in the same numbers. That's just my opinion. What do y'all think?
Kim, can I throw in one point? You might be half right. But the other half is those people sure showed up to celebrate Joe Biden or Trump losing the election just a week before the Nazis came in November.
Pop the champagne. Pop the champagne on BLM Plaza.
Noted. Thank you, Chuck, for pointing that out. Chuck Modiano, journalist and photojournalist. Follow him at Chuck Modi. We'll also be joined with Sean Michael Love, Black House News, at Black House News. You guys, support your local independent journalist, your streamer. They are out here seriously doing amazing work. Better work than your local NBC, ABC, or CBS affiliate, and better than the cable news networks, I assure you. Gentlemen, I appreciate y'all making some time today. Thank you so much.
All right.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Right.
Well,
Peace.
y'all, it didn't just go down in DC this weekend. As I mentioned at the top of the show, Olympia, Washington turned violent when there was a similar confrontation between anti-fascist protestors and people who were in support of Donald Trump coming to the state capitol to perhaps attempt to disrupt the Electoral College proceedings. Not 100% sure, but we have a journalist standing by who was valiantly covering what turned out to be a violent event at the Washington State Capitol. Shauna Sowersby is joining us today. Shauna is an independent journalist, photojournalist, has been covering a lot of these demonstrations around the Pacific Northwest all year. Shauna, I appreciate you making some time for us today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Sorry, I'm like trying to get used to this screen angle here. Which way am I going? All right. Thank you.
It's
Thanks
fine.
for having me on.
Hey, thank you. Listen, thank you for doing what you do. And let's get right into it, because I invited you today because I came across your videos on social media, and I said, ooh, I didn't even know this was happening. Lester Holt didn't tell me about this on NBC Nightly News. I didn't know what happened in Olympia, Washington at all. Dwayne, if we could, can we go to the compilation of Shauna's clips, which showed, as I mentioned before, counter demonstrations against each other, but this one turned extremely violent with a demonstrator actually being shot. Let's take a look at that.
Worried at first when I showed up a little after 9 and there wasn't hardly anybody here, but it really makes me feel good seeing all these patriots here ready to fight for our nation. God bless each and every one of you. I love you all, and hopefully it doesn't come to it. Well, I don't know about that. Maybe hopefully it does come to it, but we got to kick some ass. We're gonna kick them into the water. They want communism, they can get into the water and they can swim to China!
That's the, yep. Damn, their name's confirmed.
Come on, hey, break the window. Go! Go! Let's go! Go!
So the state troopers just let them go through.
Let's go, boy! I got nothing! One-on-one, bitch! Take your helmet off! Let's go, motherfucker! Let's go!
Oh my God, are you kidding?
I just got the chills looking at that, Shauna. First of all, I want to thank you for being here, but also want to thank you for your bravery because it's been brought to my attention that you and other journalists in the area in the Pacific Northwest, Portland, Seattle, Olympia, have received death threats for the kind of coverage that you have been doing this summer. I don't want to ask you about that in just a moment, but first let's start with what happened this past Saturday. Describe to us what we just saw and what has been the outcomes of this shooting in terms of how was a person apprehended and arrested, and how is the shooting victim doing today? I know that's a lot of questions at once, so answer them as you see fit.
Sure. So on from what you saw from the videos that you just showed, basically there were a lot of altercations that were going on between the two groups. So there was the anti-fascist Black Lives Matter protesters, and then they were there to counter-protest a anti-mask, a pro-Trump, and there were some Proud Boys that joined them as well. And so what you saw in the video, in the shot where there are a bunch of men running through was I was standing on a street corner and this is after the first major altercation had occurred between the two groups, and the Washington State Patrol and police had tried to separate them. But in that particular video, you see these guys running through, and Washington State Patrol, they're standing in front of the Washington State Patrol building right there too. But they just watched them run by. And I think even you can hear something, that's the shooter right there too, the man with the red hat on. And so they're just letting them run through. I think you can hear one of them say, "Let's go fuck them up," as they run away. And, police didn't intervene or do anything at that point to stop it. They did have some police that were at the bottom of the hill that you can't see in that scene, but they were taking off after them. Later on, when you see the man yelling at counter protesters, behind him is a line of Washington State Patrol who was also just standing by as improvised explosives were going off. I think prior to this video being shot, I'd just been there was an improvised explosive that landed near my feet, and I had to jump out of the way a little bit. But yeah, as you can see, I mean, there's no police interference. And then before we get to the scene of the shooting, the two groups had separated and were running around a building on the Capitol campus, and they eventually converged again out of line of the police officers, and then that's when the shooting occurred. Was right there on the corner.
Incredible. And, there's not a lot of details about either the shooting, alleged shooter, let's say this for journalistic purposes, the alleged shooter, and of course the shooting victim. From what I understand, they're both young men in their 20s. I was not able to find a name for the victim. I'm not sure if he even has been named, but do we have any information either about his condition, and conversely, do we have information about the person who is been charged, I would hope, in this individual shooting?
So I actually have not seen anything either about the name of the victim, but I have seen there are some crowdfunding. There's some crowdfunding going on for his medical costs. But you're right. From what I understand, I believe he was a younger Black man in his 20s. The shooter was 25. He is from Shoreline, which is up north of Seattle. And they apprehended him pretty quickly, actually. When the police arrived to clear the scene, I could hear it over the I could hear it over their walkie-talkies that they were saying that they had already apprehended him. So it wasn't very far up the road that they were able to track him down. But in terms of the victim too, I believe it ended up being a chest graze with a bullet. And so I believe he's fine, but I don't know any more details outside of that.
I certainly hope that is the case, that it was simply a graze, because I mean, it could have easily turned fatal right there. And, let me ask, you have been covering these protests, the justice for George Floyd, the movement of Black Lives, but of course, the Proud Boy element, the MAGA element of it, these, and I'm reluctant to even call these like clashes, because they're not exactly clashes. Let me get your opinion about what you have witnessed when these events turn violent. From your observations, what has been the provocateurs in the violence? Is it usually? Well, let me just ask you, what have you observed?
I will say, particularly with this event on Saturday, I was hanging out more at the Capitol, where the Trump supporters and Proud Boys and the anti-maskers were. And when they knew, you heard in the video the call for violence. I even witnessed prior to that a group of like older people that were praying over some of the Proud Boys before this altercation happened. But to me, when I hear like that sort of inflammatory language trying to get the crowd going before the other group has even arrived, then to me that signals that, who's being the one who is trying to instigate things here. And as I was walking through the crowd, once the two groups started to meet up and converge, because the counter protesters had met at a separate park and then came to the Capitol later. But as they were walking up, before anything was even happening, I was hearing guns cock in the group of Trump supporters and Proud Boys and anti-maskers, so what does that tell me, right? About like who's instigating, why is that necessary? That seems like that's an anticipation of something.
And I'm going to assume Washington State is open carry at the amount of weapons that were on display.
Yeah.
One of your first tweets from that day, it was that you observed a man wearing full body armor carrying a long rifle. And I'm thinking, you know what, Shauna, that would have been my clue to go home. But so
it crossed my mind for sure.
When you say that there an improvised explosive device landed at your feet and you had to scurry out of the way before possibly being injured, this is a tremendous amount of bravery that you're displaying here. But talk to me about what has been the other side of that, the repercussions of that. Because when I was informed that journalists in the Pacific Northwest have been, I guess, receiving death threats to the point of tremendous concern. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm in the DC, Baltimore area. I'm not saying journalists in DC and Baltimore do not receive death threats, but when you brought it to my attention, and when another individual brought it to my attention, I'm like, damn, y'all getting threats like that. Tell me about this part of the game, that experience that you're having for people harassing you, threatening you for simply doing your job and reporting exactly what you witnessed.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that's something they don't teach you in journalism school, right? Is how to deal with that type of harassment when it just comes to doing your job. But I began reporting on the protests at the beginning, so back in late May. And I will say that almost every single time I've been out and just reporting on whether it's a BLM protest, whether it's a pro-Trump protest, I'm always getting some sort of, especially on Twitter, where I post most of my things. I've had people telling me they know my address, or that, they're going to fuck me up if they see me, or I better watch myself. I mean, there's, especially me being a female too, I think maybe there's a little element to that too, some sort of like chauvinistic aspect where, I'm getting called a whore or a slut or whatever just for like being out there.
Yikes. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. I really can't. That's why I'm in tremendous admiration of you going out there and covering this. But before we let you go, Shauna, this has been a very tumultuous summer for activists and journalists alike. Journalists have been attacked not only by rowdy demonstrators, usually coming from the far right, but also there's been a number of attacks on journalists by police. Journalists getting tear gas, getting pepper sprayed, getting arrested, again, for simply bearing witness and doing their job. Is there a police department, in your opinion, in a city of which you have covered protests that is doing doing this well or doing this exceedingly bad, either when it comes to allowing the far right white supremacists to sort of do what they want to do in terms of violence and just general fuckery, and who's a police department and or city that is doing a very bad job of allowing the media to exercise their First Amendment rights without being impeded?
I will say, I don't think I've ever covered it in a city with the protests and counter protests where I think it's been done correctly. And I've reported in Portland, Seattle, and Olympia now. And, when it comes to those two groups, it's like they just don't know how to handle it. And I don't think they have any sort of protocol for trying to like keep the two groups separate or, even know what to do when violence does break out. It just seems like they just kind of throw their hands up in the air and just like, okay, let's see what happens. Let's let them duke it out. I will say that in Portland, it's, general fuckery with police and journalists. That's become kind of an well known at this point how terrible they've been to journalists just trying to do their jobs. I've been shot in the ribs with pepper balls before, back in July when the feds were in Portland. I've been tear gassed. It just seems to me overall like they don't really know how to handle any of this, including, how to react to journalists and how to react to the two groups themselves, or even just the groups on their own sometimes.
Well, if people weren't ever paying attention before 2020, this is absolutely the year that police have made the case for themselves to be defunded / abolished. Or let's put abolished before defunded, or we'll take something, but we want the big one. We want the big A, but we'll settle for the little D because the police are out here showing their entire ass. Shauna Sowersby, everyone, independent journalist. Follow her on Twitter, Shauna _Sowersby. That's on the Twitter, and her website is Shauna-Sowersby.work. Shauna, thank you for being tremendous at what you do, for not being afraid to go out and do what you do, because it is important that the rest of us bear witness to what is happening in places all across this country. Even people who may not even be familiar with Olympia, Washington, it is important to know what is happening there, and you brought that to us. So I can't thank you enough for that, and thank you for making the time to be on here with us today.
Of course. Thanks for paying attention, and thanks for having me on today.
Absolutely. Thank you. We'd love to have you back on in the future.
Take
Guys,
care.
thank you. Thank you, Shauna. Fantastic. Listen, we got some comments from the comments. Y'all, listen, if you learn nothing else from today, you learn that you need to support your local media outlets, your independent media outlets, and individuals. These are regular people out here bringing these pictures to you, getting fucked with by the police, getting harassed and assaulted by white supremacists, Proud Boys, MAGA supporters, whatever you want to call them. So please, man, put some respect on their names, and please drop some money in their funds, because this is not easy stuff. Quick, y'all, comments from the comments. Stuart Reed says, thanks for covering Olympia. 2 weeks of fascists attempting murder in our community in a row. Wow, I didn't realize it was going down like that in Olympia. I've also covered this on my podcast, Politic Oly, O-L-Y. Thank you so much, Stuart Reed. We appreciate that comment. Hey, listen, if you live in a small town, or I'm not even going to call Olympia a small town because I know it's the capital, so don't yell at me. But what my point is, hit us up. Like, hit me up on Twitter at Kim Brown Live. Like, tell me these stories, y'all, because it's bothersome to me that shit that should be national news is not national news, and it is astounding to me. Also from the comments, Zen Master says Muriel Bowser gotta go. Man, if Muriel Bowser didn't see her MPD out there slapping 5 and putting up the little OK symbol with the Proud Boys and the MAGA supporters, I don't know what in the hell she was watching. And last comment from the comments, who is this from? This is from Wayne McGuire. Wayne says, typical police, they have no duty to keep the peace or protect anyone. And they have bonds with the Proud Boys. Yes, they do. Both are mindless, self-centered thugs. You guys, so I grew up in the Maryland suburbs. We're really in between DC and Baltimore, but I can tell you, I mean, first of all, Baltimore and DC are black as shit, okay? They don't call DC Chocolate City for no reason. Now, gentrification has altered those demographics just a bit, but my point is, never in my lifetime would I think that white supremacists would be so emboldened to come to the city, walk around. Now, okay, y'all want to walk around downtown, that's one thing, but you want to go into people's neighborhoods and try to pop shit and smack people for wearing masks and just being district residents. I mean, we are living in extremely, extremely scary times, and I don't think that the scariness is about to decrease just because the occupant of the White House is about to change. So if you want to keep checking out these stories, please go to the Burn It Down with Kim Brown YouTube channel, hit subscribe, roll with your people, okay? We will talk to y'all again on Friday. Thank y'all so much for tuning in today. I super appreciate it. Thank you so much to my guest, Chuck Modiano, Sean Michael Love from Black House News, and of course, Shauna Sowersby reporting from the Pacific Northwest. Guys, have a great rest of your evening. See you later. Bye-bye.